introduced a bill pre-Charlie Kirk's assassination of trying to figure out where these violent protesters are getting the resources to engage in violent protest. I've been wondering this whole time. Can you explain why there wouldn't be investigations, the types that you're trying to introduce, to follow the money and where people are getting gas masks, where they're getting these materials to riot and burn down cities?
Look, I hope and believe that DOJ and FBI are actively investigating that right now. I have been urging for years, follow the money, go to the source. And let's rewind. During the Biden administration, when we saw anti-Semitic protests at college campuses all over the country, those were not organic. They didn't just spring up out of nowhere. I'm not the only person who noticed that almost all of the tents matched. That the radicals who are threatening students and harassing students are all wearing matching vests. There's clearly money behind it. By the way, you rewind to the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots all across the country as the country lit on fire. There was clearly money behind that. You look at the riots earlier this year in LA for open borders that were then replicated in other cities. There was clearly money behind that. And when Biden was president, I urged the DOJ follow the money, and they wouldn't do so. And I think the reason they wouldn't do so is they actually supported the rioters. They were rooting for the protesters and the rioters. And by the way, at the time that was happening on college campuses, it was fashionable to say, well, gosh, this is happening everywhere. It's terrible. And my response was, wait a second. No, it's not. This is happening in blue states with Democrat governors. This is happening in New York, in Connecticut, in Pennsylvania. It's happening in Illinois. It's happening in California. It's happening in Washington State. It ain't happening in Florida. It ain't happening in Texas. Texas, they tried to riot at the University of Texas. Cops showed up, arrested them all. And it was over in one day. Because you actually had elected officials who said, we're going to protect the students. You don't have a right to harass and threaten the safety of your fellow students. And if you do, you will be arrested. And by the way, when they arrested them, they discovered at UT, more than half of them had no connection to UT. They weren't students. They were agitators that came in from the outside.
Yeah.
The Biden DOJ would not follow the money because I think much of the money is coming from the same people who fund Joe Biden and the Democrats. So George Soros, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think there's also money likely coming from foreign nations like Qatar, like Iran, like China. I think there's a combination of foreign enemies who hate us and want to sow division, and local communists and anarchists who hate us and want to sow division. And if you want to shut it down, part of it is go and arrest anyone, all of these anti-ICE protesters and rioters who engage in violence. Every one of them ought to be put in jail if you engage in violence and threaten others. But if you really want to stop it, you got to go after the money. You got to cut off the money. And so that's what I've urged both Pam Bondi and Kash Patel to do is prosecute the people writing checks that are funding this domestic terrorism, because that's what this is domestic terrorism.
Well, and considering how often the libs claim that right-wing violence is a big issue, you'd think they'd get on board with this stuff too, because, hey, all political violence is bad, and I think we could all agree on that. But there's one side that's accusing without evidence, the other side that seems to be more prominent on the lib side of the aisle.